I compared WoW players to bots by challenging them to see who can complete dungeons the fastest and settle the debate. Are WoW players dumber than bots? I need to start off by setting some ground rules. The timer starts the second I start queuing, and I can only start queuing when I'm solo, unless every single person in the dungeon decide to re-queue together as a full group. I have to do random queue for every normal dungeon, and the timer ends when the final boss is dead. And with the ground rules down, let's start the experiment by queuing up the solo dungeons with the bots. The first thing I noticed when playing is that every single time I queue, I find a dungeon instantly, with an average so-called queue time of only 2 seconds. You can find any dungeon pretty much instantly. In this case, I'm queuing every single one of them, but you're able to queue specific ones with the exact same queue time. But enough glazing the solo dungeons. The only time I ever wiped playing with bots, it was because I overestimated how good the bots doing something even a bad group could complete. Like literally jumping over any fence they couldn't go over, the smallest obstacles, skip anything, and they always insisted on going over the road. You could be running ahead of them and they accidentally pulled one mob, and then the entire group is stuck there until he is dead. So the only reasonable course of action when playing with bots is pulling every single pack of mobs systematically until you come to the boss, which will drag out the dungeon time. And just a small comment on the bosses: the bots weren't doing any of the mechanics, they were just standing still and doing DPS, and it didn't even matter. It might be because these are normal dungeons, but anyway, their DPS weren't horrible, but it seriously isn't good. The only real problem with the bots is that they are completely brain dead and can't play the game at any optimal level. These are bots, so what did we expect? Now, after a solid 5.5 hours, re-queuing dungeon after dungeon after dungeon, I have only spent 40 seconds in queue, and the rest of it is actually just playing the game. So there's no need standing around doing nothing. With the average time per boss is 4 minutes and 44 seconds, counting with the queue time. Now finally, I'm able to play with real humans, so I can compare, is Team Humanity dumber than Team Bot? And Humanity is starting off pretty terribly with an 8-minute queue time, just to find a dungeon, compared to only 2 seconds for the bots. But when I actually find one, Humanity starts shining, because players actually have something in their head called a brain. I know, very surprising, and can understand the most basic mechanics, and are able to walk past NPCs without pulling them. Truly amazing techniques. And the first dungeon completing about 4.5 minutes faster than the average solo queue dungeon. Still not enough to compete with the bots, but because of re-queuing, they actually stand a chance. And now after 5 dungeons, I can actually start doing it. But we were able to do 4 dungeons without queuing, which cuts out about 20 minutes of sitting around. What I noticed is most WoW players are actually okay at the game. The best thing about queuing compared to bots is that sometimes you will meet literal god players doing a million DPS. Sometimes you will meet complete noob doing 5000 who don't even know how to play the game. But the average player is better than the average bot. Now, after completing about 20 dungeons, I have the actual numbers to see if bots are better than people at the game. And after compiling every single number, I have the comparison to finally know which is faster, bots or players. Let's start by watching the queue time. As said before, the solo dungeons had about 40 seconds of queuing, compared to group dungeons with about 1 hour and 45 minutes. Put simply, it's a lot more time playing the actual dungeon. For solo dungeons, 5.5 hours. And normal dungeons, 3 hours, 57 minutes and 58 seconds. Coming out with a total of 5 hours and 43 minutes between all of the 20 dungeons, which is about 13 minutes more than the solo dungeons. For the solo dungeons, on average, kill 1 boss per 4 minutes and 44 seconds. And for normal, it's 1 boss per 4 minutes and 52 seconds, an 8-second difference. It might be very small right now, but it will add up over time. The gear drop rate is pretty much the exact same at 1.25 pieces of armor every single dungeon, and the amount of times the group wiped is the exact same on solo dungeons and normal. And now going into deep high-tech big brain analysis on every single number. As I said before, the average bot dungeon is about 4% faster than the player dungeon, but if you discount every dungeon with a re-queued, the average bot dungeon is about 20% faster, which is a lot. And also, a bit more complicated, but instead of removing all the re-queue dungeons, I replaced them with the average queue time, discounting the re-queues. It's a solid 20.94% faster. So what is the actual conclusion of this? If you don't have a group, always play with bots. And if you want to play a specific dungeon, especially play with bots, because the queue time for specific dungeons are usually a lot slower. They will probably take up to 10 or 20 minutes even. If you have actual friends, always play with them because it will be much faster than bots. I'm almost at 1000 subscribers, so if you liked the video, please subscribe so we can get there.